Hi, everybody. Billy Obenauer here. Thanks for joining me for this lesson in our series on principles of management. In this lesson, we're going to be covering chapter 6 of Bateman and Konoposki's book, and that chapter is going to focus on entrepreneurship. So let's get started. As we move through this lesson, we're going to talk about why people become entrepreneurs and what it takes to become a successful entrepreneur. All right, we're going to look at how we assess opportunities to start a new company, look at some of the common causes of success and failure for entrepreneurs, some of the common management challenges that entrepreneurs face. We're going to look at how to increase your chances of success, including good business planning. And finally, we're going to describe how managers in large companies can foster a culture of entrepreneurship within their company. Now, let's start by defining a few terms that we're going to use here. So, entrepreneurship is the process by which enterprising individuals initiate, manage, and assume the risks and rewards associated with a business venture. Under that umbrella, we often think of two terms here: small business and entrepreneurial venture. Well, a small business is one that we would typically think of as having a small number of employees, typically under 500 employees, less than $7.5 million a year in annual revenue. Okay, these are independently operated, independently owned and operated, not necessarily dominant in their field. They don't necessarily strive to innovate. Okay, so I used a local pizzeria as an example of a small business here. All right, and why we would look at this and say it's a small business, it's got maybe a dozen employees. Its sales have not exceeded the $7.5 million that we're talking about. It is independently owned, but if you think about it, it's not really dominant in its field. In this particular town, there's probably five or six different pizzerias similar to this. Okay, this one here is my personal favorite. Okay, but there are others, right? So this one doesn't necessarily own the market. All right. And it's not necessarily characterized by innovation or attempts to grow. All right. So the owner does a very great job with this restaurant, but they're not looking to build 12 more restaurants. They're not looking to expand. They're not looking to move out of the location that they're in. So we would look at them and we would consider them a small business. Now, that's not to say there's nothing related to entrepreneurship here. Okay. I would not turn around and argue that the business owner is not an entrepreneur, but within the framework of this lesson, I want you to think of this as a small business. Okay, now an entrepreneurial venture is one that has more growth and high profitability as its primary objectives. All right, so growth opportunities are huge. All right, so I use an example here of a company called Major Buzz. Major Buzz was based out of Albany, New York, and they built an app that helped with food ordering and it helped managing data on the back end for restaurants. And it was really kind of an innovative app that they had put together. And what they were really looking to do with this thing was they were looking to scale it and make it something that was used nationally. Okay. Now, because their goal was to grow and they saw potential for high profitability, we would consider this an entrepreneurial venture. Now, building off our definition of entrepreneurship on the previous slide, an entrepreneur is somebody who establishes a new organization without the benefit of corporate sponsorship. Okay, so what that means is this new organization does not fall under the umbrella of another company. All right, an entrepreneur is a manager. Okay, but a manager is not necessarily an entrepreneur. Okay, so this is not necessarily a full cycle. All right, an entrepreneur is a manager, but a manager is not necessarily an entrepreneur. All right. And then entrepreneurs use networks of contacts quite a bit. So networking is very important to entrepreneurs because they need to know different people who are in the space that they're working in. Now, intrapreneurs are a little bit different from entrepreneurs. All right. They also work on new venture creation, but they work inside of big companies. Okay. So one of the examples of a place where you see a lot of entrepreneurs would be a company like Google. All right. And Google was known for many years for offering its employees the option to spend 20% of their work week working on passion projects. And different things came out of this, like Google Voice and whatnot. And the people who were developing these and building these businesses within Google, they are what we would call intrapreneurs. So we've talked a bit about risk here, and being an entrepreneur can be hard. So why do people become entrepreneurs? Well, the main reason people tend to become entrepreneurs is because they're looking for something in their life that they're not getting through their current place of employment. Okay, so it might be that they want more of a challenge or they want the opportunity to earn more. All right, so if I think about when I was a manager, all right, I managed a business that put $1.4 million dollars to the bottom line every year. Okay, my salary and bonus total was about 110, $120,000, right? So there's a huge profit potential when you're an owner as compared to being a manager. All right. Maybe they're looking for more job satisfaction. Maybe people's ideas are being blocked, okay, or they can't be as successful at the company that they're at as they'd like to be. All right. And often we think about this as happening in large corporations where maybe somebody works for a really big company and they have a great idea, but they can't follow it. All right. But it can happen in small companies too. All right. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. He was in the automobile industry, and he grew up working for his father. And my grandfather wanted to grow the business. He had ideas about how they could take advantage of demographic shifts in the marketplace, but his father wasn't really passionate about that. His father didn't have an interest in growing. He was happy just running a small business. So my grandfather continued to work for his father because he loved his father and he wanted to help him, but he went and started his own business on the side. And over time, his business grew and became much larger than his father's. And years later, he actually reacquired his father's business and the two family businesses became one. Now, to be successful as an entrepreneur, somebody has to have basically good general management skills. They also have to be creative and have a desire for innovation. All right. So, as we look at this matrix here, we got a four-box matrix, and we see our entrepreneurs are going to be high on management skills. Okay. We see them over here on the right. Okay. And they're also going to be high on creativity and innovation. All right. Now we've got other positions here. We see managers, promoters, inventors. And what we're saying here as we look at them in these boxes and compare them to entrepreneurs is not that a manager can't be high on creativity and innovation. Okay, a manager can be creative, all right, but they don't have to be. All right, you can be a manager while still being low on the creativity and innovation scale over here, but as long as you have the good general management skills, you're going to be okay as a manager. As an entrepreneur, you need to have both the good general management skills and the creativity and innovation on your side. Now, once you've decided you want to become an entrepreneur, you have to figure out what type of business you want to start. And as you do that, there's two key things that you need to consider. All right, first, you have to have a good idea. Every good business starts with a good idea. Second, you have to find the right opportunity for that idea. So, what encompasses a good idea? Well, a good idea involves having a great product, a good market, and good timing. All right. And when I think about a company that had a good idea, one place that comes to mind to me is a company called Our News. Again, Our News was founded by a person named Richard Zack, and Richard came up with this idea back around 2016, maybe a little bit earlier than that. But his idea was based upon the fact that there was a problem with news. Okay, people didn't necessarily trust the news when they saw it on TV or when they read it. Okay, so he said, there's got to be a way that we can figure out what we trust here. So he came up with Our News, which is an app that allows people to essentially rate the trustworthiness of different articles and so on and so forth. Okay, now, I don't know if the product itself is perfect, right? The market will decide that over time. All right. But what he did have for sure was he had a viable market. Okay. He had a viable market because people want to trust the news. Okay. So there was a growing proportion of the population that was not necessarily trusting the news. This created problems for news organizations as well, because if people don't trust the news, then the news organizations aren't going to be able to perform as well. All right. So the market was there. All right. And the timing was perfect. All right. Because this idea came out right around the 2016 election cycle, which is when trust for the news was at a very low point in time. All right. So if you dig into Our News, what you're going to see when you look at that product is that really they had a really neat idea in terms of what the product was. All right. But Richard also saw that there was certainly a viable market and good timing. And that's part of what has helped this business grow and stick around for years and get some of the funding that it's gotten over this time. All right. Our News has done a very good job in terms of starting to build a sustainable business model. And all this stems from the fact that they started with a good idea. Now, opportunities can arise from a variety of different places. So, to start, we have technological discoveries. We've talked about a few different apps today in this lesson. And if you think about it, none of those apps have any type of opportunity if we don't have smartphones. So, that's just one example of how technological discoveries have opened up opportunities. All right, we have demographic changes. So, we talked earlier in the unit about how people are living longer. Okay, people are working longer. Well, what types of opportunities does that create? Right? I think about we got my grandfather these things to put under his chair that make his chair be a little bit higher off the ground, so it's a little bit easier for him to get up and out of his chair. Okay, he needed that because he's 91 years old. All right, but if people weren't living longer, opportunities for products like that don't exist. All right, we have lifestyle and taste changes. Okay, so over time, what we want changes. Okay, people used to like to go out to video stores and rent movies. Okay. But then when we figured out that we can get the convenience of doing this stuff in our own home and select things remotely, all right, we did have a little bit of a taste change. Now, you'll notice that in that example, we also had technological discoveries. So sometimes we see technology being linked to our lifestyle and taste changes. Okay, we have economic dislocations and we have calamities. Okay, and these two things basically, what does this mean? Different types of disasters, different types of problems that we're responding to. Okay, as different problems arise, different entrepreneurial opportunities arise because we need solutions to those problems. And then finally, we have government initiatives and changes. So if you think about every time the government puts something out there that creates a new regulation, an entrepreneurial opportunity for organizations that are going to help people meet that regulation arises. All right. So if we put out rules that we're going to lower emissions on automobiles, now all of a sudden we have opportunities for companies who can develop technology that help make that possible. One type of entrepreneurial opportunity that you might consider taking advantage of is franchising. All right, and franchising is basically when we have an alliance between two different parties. What happens is we have a larger organization that wants to expand, and this organization wants to expand, but they don't necessarily want to invest all the capital that would be required for expanding. So they come up with a plan where they allow others to basically use their names, use their products, and so on in their business. All right, but the entrepreneurs that are doing this, they incur part of the cost. All right. So the main company is what we refer to as a franchisor, and the entrepreneur who's opening up a new location under this name is a franchisee. And we see franchises in a variety of different businesses. So we see it in Anytime Fitness is a gym that's franchised. Subway is a restaurant that's franchised. Midas is an automobile repair shop that is franchised. So there's a lot of different businesses where you can get involved in a franchise. One of the advantages to getting involved with a franchise is it's a proven business concept. Now, it's not foolproof, it's not failure proof, but there has been a lot of success in franchising. Okay, you have immediate name recognition, all right, you have marketing on your behalf, and you get a lot of guidance in terms of how you run your business. So the franchisees can take advantage of expertise from the franchisor in a variety of ways. Okay, so they may have certain best practices or training available, but you're also benefiting from their market expertise, right? So if you open up a Subway restaurant, you don't have to figure out what types of sandwiches you need to sell because Subway is an expert in figuring out what types of sandwiches to sell, and they've put the menu together for you already. All right, so these are a few of the reasons that people do consider becoming franchisees. Now, the internet has created a lot of different business opportunities for entrepreneurs as well. All right, so we have a transaction fee model, and this is where you go on the internet and you pay for a product or you pay for a service. So if I go to Amazon and I buy a good, I pay for that. I bought it from Amazon. That's a transaction fee model. Okay, we have the advertising support model. So Google and Facebook rely on this pretty heavily, right? So if I have a Facebook account, I use my Facebook account, I don't pay anything to use that Facebook account, but advertisements pop up in my stream all the time. And those advertisements are how Facebook makes money. That's the advertising support model. Then we have an intermediary model, and eBay is a great example of this. And basically, what happens with the intermediary model is maybe I want to sell something on the internet, and maybe you want to buy something on the internet. So I go to eBay, I've opened up an account, I list whatever it is I want to sell, I've set the price on it. You agree to purchase it, you purchase it, and then I pay a small commission to eBay. That's how they make money. That's the intermediary model. Okay, the affiliate model is a little bit different from the intermediary model, but very similar. Okay, once again, I want to sell something on the internet. Maybe I use the affiliate model, but here, instead of me setting the price and then negotiating or anything like that, the actual affiliate, the one who runs the website that my product is being sold on, they're going to determine the prices based upon the value of my product and what I'm charging for it. So in this case, basically what happens is a little bit different from eBay, because on eBay, in the intermediary model, I determine the price. In the affiliate model, the website that people are interfacing with determines the price. And then finally, we have the subscription model. The subscription model is something that we all see with like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and so on, where they might give you a few free articles to let you kind of see what they have. But then after that, if you want to use their service, you have to pay a monthly subscription. Now, as we think about next frontiers or places that we're going to see future entrepreneurial opportunities, I don't want you to memorize all these. There's not really a value in memorizing what the future entrepreneurial opportunities are, but we do want to understand how to recognize them a little bit. All right. So when we think of cryptocurrency, it's 2021 as I'm making this video. Dogecoin was huge this year. Okay. Bitcoin is worth a fortune. And I think back to 2012, when I had a friend who was investing in Bitcoin and was telling everybody in the world to invest in it. Many of us, we didn't understand what it was. We didn't see the potential for this to work. And people thought it was a little bit of an out there investment, right? But my friend invested quite a bit and benefited from that. Okay. If you think about space travel, all right, space travel, we had in 2021 three separate private companies take trips into outer space. Okay. 5 years ago, most of us wouldn't have thought that that was even possible. Okay. So space travel is another example of something where, we're seeing it happen, but only a few years ago, people didn't really think it was possible. Okay. The healthcare sector, there's a ton of opportunities in healthcare, and these new opportunities are emerging all the time. Okay. They emerge in response to new diseases. They emerge in response to new needs for accessibility and so on and so forth. But as we think about these next frontiers, there's no way to possibly memorize what every single frontier is, but we do want to start to think about how do we begin to recognize these as they emerge so that we can be first movers in these spaces. Now, another really cool opportunity for entrepreneurs is the space of social entrepreneurship. And this is where we're leveraging our resources to address social problems. And I get really excited to talk about this because I love using the example of Rainforest Connection. Okay, Rainforest Connection is an organization that I first found out about back in about 2013. I saw them on Kickstarter, and they were founded by a guy named Topher White. And Topher had recognized a few environmental opportunities that he was responding to here with Rainforest Connection. Now, the first one was that we have this terrible problem of deforestation of rainforests. And part of the problem comes from the fact that people are cutting down trees in the forest, and we don't have enough rangers to protect the forest. Okay, so by the time the rangers become aware of deforestation, the trees are already gone. It's not like you can just put the trees back up. So Topher said, we really need to find a way to identify deforestation as it's happening so that rangers can stop it rather than report it. Okay, the other problem that Topher saw was that we have a lot of cell phones that are getting used and then going into our waste system. Okay, and we need to figure out a way to continue to use this material so that it's not hurting the environment. All right, and what he did was he came up with this design, and he took old cell phones and he turned them into surveillance devices, and they kind of look like big flowers, and they go up in the tree canopies. And then what they do is they essentially monitor the forest. They listen for sounds. Okay. And these sounds, They go into a computer. He's got an algorithm written, and what they can identify is they can identify the sounds of engines, they can identify the sounds of chainsaws, they can identify the sounds of all sorts of different things related to deforestation. You might say, hey, chainsaw sounds might change with times, or truck sounds might change with times. Well, his algorithm can also identify animal distress signals, and those are not things we expect to change in times. But these distress signals continually occur when deforestation is happening. All right. So what happens basically with this product is the product is a sound monitor for the rainforest. Okay. And then what it does is through an algorithm, it identifies deforestation automatically. Nobody has to listen to this, and it dispatches rangers when deforestation is happening. And Topher, one time while out in an area promoting this product, was with a ranger, and they got an alert. They went out to the forest and they were able to actually stop an entire section from being cut down. So that's an example of a really cool product working in the social entrepreneurship space that has been highly effective. Now, as we evaluate all these different opportunities as entrepreneurs, we're going to engage in trial and error. Okay. So, as we engage in trial and error, we're going to find some things work, some things don't work. Sometimes we find a lot of things that work, but some things work better than others. All right. And as we go through this trial and error, we might capitalize on something known as a side street effect. And what that basically means is we're going straight down one street. Okay. And we think that's the right street to go down. But then all of a sudden, maybe we find something off on the side and we follow that because it works a little bit better. Okay. One example of that might be Amazon. Okay. So if we look at Amazon, we think about the history of Amazon. Amazon started by selling books out of Jeff Bezos' garage, right? Now Amazon still sells books, okay, but originally Amazon was a book company. All right. Amazon over time became something much larger, such something much bigger than a book company. All right. So they set out to sell books, and that was kind of their main street. But then they went down this side street here where they found a whole bunch of other things that they could sell using their platform, and that's an example of the side street effect. So, what does it take for us as entrepreneurs to succeed? Well, to start, you need to have commitment and determination. Okay, you're gonna be invested in a very very long time if your entrepreneurial venture is going to be successful. You're also going to have good leadership skills. And you might be thinking, well, hey, I'm gonna work for myself. Maybe I'm not going to have a lot of employees. Why do I need to be a good leader? Well, you are going to have some employees, right? And you're going to have to learn, how do I delegate to these people? What tasks do I need to take on to myself? So on and so forth. You're going to have business partners that you work with. You're going to have companies that you partner with, and all these relationships are going to require you to be leading people because nobody's going to understand your vision the way you understand it. Okay? You need to have opportunity obsession. Now, what do we mean by that? We mean that you need to recognize the opportunity that's in front of you and not be willing to let go of it. All right. And a great example of this comes back to Tony Hsieh and Zappos, right? Tony ran his bank account down to nothing. All right. When they were building Zappos. But he saw the opportunity that there was with Zappos, and he was willing to take all these risks and put all the work in that he needed to because he was just absolutely obsessed with this opportunity and focused on making sure that it worked. All right. Related to that, I mentioned risk. So, tolerance of risk, ambiguity, and uncertainty is very important for entrepreneurs. Okay, at one point in time in my career, I looked at actually opening up an insurance agency. All right, I met with people from State Farm. We talked about franchising. We were really, really planning on moving forward here. But the more I looked at it, the more I just could not really stomach the risk that was involved in terms of the investment that I would have to make. All right. So for me, that didn't work. People who are successful entrepreneurs have the ability to tolerate this risk and not allow it to overcome them. All right. You have to have creativity, self reliance, and the ability to adapt. All right. One thing for entrepreneurs that you need to remember is that you are your own boss. That means when things aren't working well, you might have resources you can go to, but at the end of the day, you're going to be responsible for solving that problem. All right. And then finally, you have to have a motivation to excel. All right. Failure cannot be something that you're willing to accept if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. In addition to having the traits that you need to succeed, you also have to think about the types of choices that you're going to make. All right. So as entrepreneurs, we're going to look at areas that are high risk and we're going to look at areas that are low risk. We're going to look at areas that require high innovation and areas that require low innovation. Now, if we look at this high innovation, high risk space, this is going to be where we're going to have the most potential for big returns on our investment. All right. And that's because that's a very blue ocean. If you remember our discussion on blue oceans, right? Blue oceans are areas where there's not a lot of competition. Well, by definition, if something is high innovation, it means there's probably not a lot of people working in that space. And if it's high risk, there's a lot of people who are going to be motivated to stay out of that space. All right. So if we go in this space, we understand there's a pretty good chance that we could fail, but if we succeed, we can make a lot of money. All right. So we might choose not to go into this space because we might not want to take on that risk. All right. We might go into a lower risk space. Now, as we go into lower risk spaces, this is where we're going to have more competition. Now, if it's low risk, high innovation, our competition might not be quite so bad. If it's low risk, low innovation, then our competition might be a little more fierce, but we might feel like there's a little less risk and our chance of losing is not quite so big. All right. However, our chance of losing might not be quite so big in this box here down on the bottom left, but our chances of making really good returns on our investment are probably lower as well. Now, I know I just told you you have to really have a desire to succeed, but failure does happen in entrepreneurship. In fact, failure is so common that some entrepreneurs say things like fail often and fail hard and fail often. And the idea behind that is that they're saying figure out what ideas don't work, push them hard, let them fail, and then move on to something that can be successful. Now, it's important as you think about failure to try to anticipate what your risk is. All right. Because if you can understand your risk, you have a greater likelihood of overcoming the risk. All right. Now, it's also important to recognize that most startups don't get funding from venture capitalists. All right. They're self funded. All right. What that means is that you don't have external groups investing in your business, but instead you might be relying on your own savings. You might be going to friends and family members for loans. You might even be doing things like running up bills on your credit cards. Okay. And that may not be ideal in all situations, but there's actually some evidence that entrepreneurs who are self funded make more responsible decisions because they have a little more of a vested interest in the outcome, in the sense that they feel like they are going to incur significant loss if their business is not successful. Okay. Now, recognize that what you do as an entrepreneur is going to be somewhat determined by the economic environment. And we've talked about that a little bit. Our opportunities are going to be shaped by the economic environment. All right. And there's also resources out there to help you as an entrepreneur. And one of the greatest resources you'll come across is a business incubator. Okay. And these are environments that help provide resources to entrepreneurs so you can pay to have a membership there, basically have a low rent of sorts, and you may have access to equipment. So I've seen incubators where people can go in and they can use 3D printing stations at a very significantly reduced cost. They may have access to printing, they may have access to computers, access to all sorts of different resources that would be very expensive if they had to pay for them all up front. So, what are some of the challenges that entrepreneurs face? Well, for starters, you might not enjoy it. Okay. Maybe you get into a business because it's something you're passionate about. All right. So, maybe you love cooking, so you start a restaurant. Well, the challenge there is that you started this restaurant because you love cooking, but now you've also got to do the marketing, you've got to do the accounting, you've got to do all the other things associated with the business that you're not quite so passionate about. All right. So, you might find that you don't really enjoy it because you just want to cook. All right. Survival is difficult. We've talked about a lot of the reasons that new entrepreneurial ventures can struggle to survive. Okay. So you really do have to be prepared to put in the time and the effort and the energy in order to make that happen. Growth also creates new challenges. All right. So what happens as we grow is we need new facilities, we need new resources. So maybe you start a small coffee shop and it only has 6 tables in it. And when you don't have a big following, that works really well. Okay, well, what happens when your coffee shop is packed every day? Do you move to a new location? Because if you move to a new location because you're growing, maybe you're not as convenient for your existing customers. Maybe they can't find you. Maybe you risk losing people there. All right, do you stay where you're at? Because if you stay where you're at, and it takes 25 minutes to get a cup of coffee, people might stop coming to your coffee shop. All right. So as we grow, new challenges are created. All right. It's hard to delegate. Oh my gosh, this one rings true here. A lot of entrepreneurs are really passionate about what they do and they have a lot of confidence in their own abilities. Okay. Because of that, they don't necessarily want to hand things off to other people. I remember at one point in time, I worked for a small business where the owner had always been the salesperson. He had been the only person who ever sold anything. He wouldn't even allow me to talk to customers. If a customer came into the building, he'd be like, run to the back, run to the back, right? Well, one day he was using the restroom and I helped a customer and I sold some product and he was shocked to even learn that I knew how to sell something, that I could figure out how to sell something. Okay. So then all of a sudden he said, hey, do you think I could train you to sell things a little more? And I was 16 or 17 years old. I said, absolutely, I could learn this. Right. So he did train me to become a salesperson. And he started training our bookkeeper to become a salesperson. He started training everyone who worked for him to sell product. And once he did that, our sales grew because we had more of a team of salespeople as opposed to just one person. But many entrepreneurs have trouble letting go, they have trouble delegating. All right, sometimes we don't have great controls on things that are happening, okay, because we're very responsive to what's going on. And we have issues with misuse of funds. And we talked about this a little bit when I said people who are self-funded actually make more responsible decisions than people who get funding elsewhere, like through venture capital firms. All right. There are a lot of troubles that people have with going public. All right. So as we need more funds for our businesses, we might look to have an initial public offering or allow people to buy stock in our company to help bring some cash in. Well, once that happens, now all of a sudden we have to kind of maintain this balance of doing what's right for the business and following the dream that we're following and trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the stockholders. And that can be a very, very big challenge. All right. And then finally, we have mortality as an issue. For those organizations that don't go public, those that stay as privately held businesses, what happens when the owner no longer can run the business? Right? So what happens when the owner's ready to retire or they pass away or they just don't want to do it anymore? Right? Do we have people lined up who can take over the business? These are all challenges that entrepreneurs need to think about. Now, as we enter the planning phases with our entrepreneurial ventures, we're going to engage in an opportunity analysis and a business plan. And what the opportunity analysis is going to do is it's really going to focus on trying to identify what it is in the market that we're responding to. What is the need that is out there that we're trying to take advantage of? Our business plan, however, is going to cover just about everything that we're going to have to be involved with. Okay, so the business plan is going to take us from the very beginning to the end in terms of how are we developing our business? How are we going to market it? What do our financials look like? And so on and so forth. It's really going to be the layout for how we're going to be successful from start to finish. Now, this here is a basic overview of what we're going to see in a business plan. All right. And I'm not going to go over each one of these points in detail, but you'll notice it starts with an executive summary, which really just kind of tells the reader overall what they're going to be looking at. And then, we start with looking at the industry, our market analysis, the economics of the business, the marketing plan, and so on. And then at the end, we get to the financial plan here. And the financial plan is something that is very important because our investors obviously are going to want to understand the finances of our business. But one struggle that many entrepreneurs have is that they spend so much time and energy on the finance plan that they tend to neglect some of the other areas associated with the business plan that are critical to making everything that you're relying upon in the finance plan work. Now here we've got a few elements that you want to consider as you're planning, all right? And we're going to start with the people. So investors tend to invest in people, right? We have to have the right people for our business. We have to have people who are passionate about what they do, and we have to have the right people for the right positions. Okay? We don't need a whole team of people who are all great at the same thing if we have other areas that we have to cover that we don't have the right people for. All right, you also have to think about the opportunity. We talked a little bit about opportunity analysis, but what is the unmet need that you are meeting? Okay, why does the market need your business? Okay, why do consumers need you? And then next, Building upon that, we're going to think about the competition. Now, the competition may not have recognized this need, but once you open up shop, you're going to be announcing to the competition that this need exists. Well, the question then is how are they going to respond? Okay. If you open up a business that somehow competes with a Lowe's or a Home Depot, do you think those companies are going to just sit back and let you have that portion of the business? Or are they going to look and find a way to try to enter that space themselves? Right? That's what we need to be thinking about with our competition. All right, and then we have the context. Are there regulations or economic factors that will get in your way? All right, so I can think of businesses that have had ideas that they wanted to pursue, but then when they looked at the land that they wanted to pursue these ideas on, there were zoning regulations or something that kept them from pursuing the business opportunity. And then finally, we look at the risk and reward. Do the potential benefits justify the risk? All right, so let's say the return on investment for investing in your business is only going to be 1.5%, but there's a 98% chance you're going to lose all your money. Well, that's a lot of risk for very little return on investment, right? So if we're looking at something that is high risk, the reward should be high. If we're looking at something that is low reward, then the risk should be low. Now, our business plan is a great tool for getting investors to support the plan. But if we're going to get investors to support the plan, we need to make sure that our plan lays out how we're going to reduce risk and maximize the reward. And if we're successful in getting good investors, a lot of professional investors can offer expertise. Okay. They have no interest in seeing your business fail, and they have a lot of experience investing in new businesses. So these investors often can provide you with a lot of good feedback and information that can help you be successful. As I mentioned on the previous slide, our investors can help us with more than just finances. All right. One of the areas that they can help us out with is legitimacy. And what I mean by that is let's look at an example here. So, Sequoia is one of the largest venture capital firms out there. Okay. And people generally speaking know that if Sequoia invests in your business, that there is something to your business. Well, that gives you some legitimacy. All right. Because being associated with Sequoia essentially says your business is worthy of their attention. All right. Now, our association with investors can help us build our networks. It can get us social capital, all right, where we start to build good reputations. They can help us fill out our top management teams or put people on our advisory boards, even help us find business partners. In the final section of this lesson, we're going to talk about corporate entrepreneurship. And this is the space where those intrapreneurs that we talked about at the beginning of the lesson, this is the space that those intrapreneurs operate in. All right. And with corporate entrepreneurship, basically what's happening here is we're still trying to build new ideas and take them to market, but we're doing them within existing organizations. All right. So there's a few different questions that corporate entrepreneurs have to consider. First one is very similar to something that an entrepreneur would consider, and it's does the venture satisfy a need in the market? All right. And if it does, the next question is, does it leverage our strengths and experience? That's a little bit different for organizations because organizations are trying to build off of what they're already doing. All right. Related to that, they're going to think about does the venture fit into the organization's strategic direction? All right. So if your organization is looking to develop specific markets, you're going to probably want to build ventures that are related to those markets. All right. What resources are going to be required to launch the venture? All right. That's very similar to something that an entrepreneur would think about. And how are you going to respond if the venture fails? All right. So what happens if the venture is not successful for our organization? These are all questions that entrepreneurs have to think about as they engage in corporate entrepreneurship. Now, as an entrepreneur, it's critical that you get support within your organization for the work that you're doing. And you're going to start with your immediate boss, just getting their support in terms of the time investment, financial investment, and so on. Right? You also want to have cheerleaders who are supporting your idea. And what we mean by this is people in the organization need to care about what you're doing and support it. Because if we want managers to invest in it, if we can create some energy behind the idea, we're going to be a lot more successful in getting management support. All right. There's also a tactic called horse trading that you can get involved in. And basically, what we're talking about with horse trading is we're looking at enticing people to support your idea. So, hey, if this gets off the ground and this happens, this is the opportunity it could create for you, or this is what my venture could do for your division, and so on and so forth. So, you're basically trying to show your peers how the project that you're working on is going to help them so that they'll give you their support. And then finally, you have to make sure that your upper management is also supporting the idea. And entrepreneurship can come from a variety of areas within our organization. So sometimes we see what we call a skunk works project. And this is basically where we take people, we put them in a group. The idea is we want them to develop a new product. They have a set amount of time, and then hopefully they're successful. But if they're not punished. People can go back to their old jobs. All right. Another way that we see entrepreneurship is through a process called bootlegging. And this is where people informally work on projects. So I talked before about how at Google people could use 20% of their time to work on projects of their passion. That would be an example of bootlegging. Now, just like entrepreneurship comes with its own risks. And this can sometimes lead organizations to fail to foster entrepreneurship. All right. But this is not necessarily the best response because when we fail to foster entrepreneurship, we provide our competition with the opportunity to gain an advantage on us. All right. So now, if we do foster entrepreneurship, one problem that we may run into is we may have over reliance on a single project. Okay, so we may look at one thing and kind of put all our eggs in that basket. And then if it fails, we've achieved nothing. Now, the opposite end of that is that we can spread our entrepreneurial efforts over too many projects and then not have the right resources to invest in any of them. So we really need to kind of find that sweet spot between investing in only one project and relying on that too much and investing in too many projects. But not all firms are going to take on that risk that we talked about because some firms have higher entrepreneurial orientations than others. All right. So some firms really want to capitalize on entrepreneurship while others don't necessarily want to do that. All right. And those that are high on entrepreneurial orientation, they embrace independent action. All right. So they don't necessarily look for their employees to have every single thing they're going to do approved. They want people to take the freedom to exercise creativity and work on ideas that they think are going to be effective. All right. They care about innovativeness. All right. So they support new ideas and experimenting. And it's okay to fail. Okay. So they're okay with risk taking because they embrace failure as being a part of the process. All right. They'll also be a little more proactive in the sense that they want to look at what are the future opportunities that we have out there and how can we capitalize on them. And they have high competitive aggressiveness. All right. So they're not afraid to go out there and challenge their competitors directly. Now, that's it for this lesson on entrepreneurship. Thanks for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. We'll talk to you soon.